Okay, so let's give some commentary and hear from the man himself, the one who will be the Assyrian, will be the son of perdition, will become the Antichrist, Prince Hassan Bin Talal of Jordan, in this interview.
Your Royal Highness, Prince Hassan Bin Talal, thank you very much for joining us on the interview.
Thank you for inviting me.
I was trying to find the best way to describe what you're doing based on my reading, based on watching.
So what you'll find here is a reverence for him because, again, in the Muslim world, in the European world, number one, he's revered as from the Europeans' point of view because he's a monarch. And in Europe culture, there's a deference and a highly, highly reverent respect for those who are of monarch descent or those who come from nobility. So if you're a prince, duke, all that, they're revered. And then also in the Muslim world, in the Arab world, he's so significant because he's the descendant of the Prophet Muhammad, and he's also of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. So that makes him a nobility among Muslims and Islam. So he's extremely revered and highly respected, like the Pope, like Pope Francis is among the rest of the world. So understand in that context how Pope Francis is to the west, Prince Hassan Bin Talal of Jordan is to the east.
Your interviews, listening to your interviews. And I think the only way I could describe it to myself was that there's a lot of suffering going on in the world. There's a lot of trauma collectively and personally. And you're using your position to try to make it a little better.
So I just want you to capture how the world is so flattered by his ambition to solve world peace, you know, and stop the suffering in the world, when the scriptures tells us the truth of his heart, because we know what he's going to do. And what he's going to do is usher in his own will. What he's going to do is fulfill his own ambition, especially once Satan enters him, just like when Satan entered Judas. So Judas had his own selfish agenda and selfish ambition. Then Satan entered him, and then Satan did what he wanted to do and fulfill his own ambition, because those two share the same titles. Judas is called the son of perdition, who was possessed by Satan, and the Antichrist is also called the son of perdition, who will also be possessed by Satan. So you see here how so far just gives you a glimpse on how the world reveres this man as the leading candidate to solve world problems. So I just want you to again get familiarized with him as we really push into Prince Hassan Bin Talal of Jordan. All right, let's continue.
Would that be accurate?
I think that's a fair description, but in simple words, I'm pursuing my passions, which are basically the service of the concept of human dignity, which I fear is...
Okay, that's another thing that you're finding about Prince Hassan Bin Talal of Jordan is this coin. He loves coining new phrases and wordplay. So one thing you hear him talk about is human dignity, human dignity, human dignity, and he'll explain in just a second. Basically, that hey, we have so much in common that we do that's different. It's human dignity. So you hear human dignity and so many more different coined phrases of his. So you start to understand how flattering this man is. He's just so sophisticated and educated. So you kind of really get a sense of this is the candidate that Satan wants to possess. This is the man Satan wants to possess. So Satan sees his heart and sees that this man has a heart just like him. So understand that is the context that we're looking at in terms of deception, flattery, pride, ambition, and the list goes on. But once you just catch his coin phrases, human dignity.
Woefully lacking in the world today. And as I don't have any hobby per se, I think that interacting with people is probably promoting the noble art of conversation is what I do. Not conversion, mind you, but conversation.
So funny that he says he wants to promote the noble art of conversation, not conversion. But we find that when Satan enters his body and then the mark of the beast is enforced on the world, oh, it's totally going to be about conversion. If you don't worship the beast, and which is going to be Pope Francis, the idol that's made unto him, enforced by him, Prince Hassan Bin Talal of Jordan, who will force it upon the world by getting the mark of the beast on your hand or your forehead. So if you don't prove who you worship by getting the mark of the beast on your hand and your forehead, it's totally about conversion, because you're going to be executed. That's the prophecy in Revelation, that those who don't get the mark of the beast will be executed. Now, this is totally different from what he's saying now, but when Satan enters him and the mark of the beast is enforced on the world, it's totally going to be about conversion.
Human dignity can mean many things to many different people. Tell me what it means to you.
All right, now pay attention. This is his definition of human dignity. Shouldn't we all have human dignity? Right.
It means creating a fair framework for disagreement. I can disagree with you on 6 or 7 out of 8 points, but at least we leave some chance for another conversation. I think that people don't talk to each other in an age of fantastically speedy communications, and there is not emphasis given to content and facts. Now we need incontrovertible facts, not my facts or your facts. These are different takes on the same issue possibly, but the basic facts. I mean, are 71% of the fish in the Eastern Mediterranean not coming from the Red Sea? Yes, they are. That's an extraordinary fact. And why? Because of the global warming. I mean, this is something that is worth bearing in mind. And so as we go along, we discover so many things that basically take us back to the fact that man against man, man against nature, and man-made disasters have brought us to where we are. So if we call it an Anthropocene, does the human contribution to all of this always have to be negative and destructive? No, it doesn't.
But what makes...
Okay, so again, you see how he's so eloquent in his words in explaining how his perspective of solving world problems should be just by pushing your differences aside and come together as humanity. The whole world should be one. If this doesn't ring the bell, again, it points to the Tower of Babel, where the whole world came together to build a tower to try to reach God, absent of God's right, absence of being obedient to God. So they wanted to reach heaven their own way, similar to like Cain and Abel. Abel worshiped God in the manner God wanted in his offering and sacrifice. Cain wanted to worship God in the manner in which he wanted, and God didn't honor his sacrifice. And because of that, he killed his brother. So we see there is a stark difference between what God wants and what we should do to please God, and what mankind wants in the selfish nature of man and pride of man to do what we want to do. The same thing with him, his perspective of his outlook on solving the world and let's bring the world together. But again, it'll play all into what Scripture says he's going to do, so you can kind of get a better understanding about it.
Makes you still optimistic at the age of 75 now that we're going to hopefully get it right this time?
The smiles of my grandchildren. You know, I feel that I leave this mortal coil sooner rather than later. But
let's be clear, it is not the smiles of the grandchildren that give him hope. He is bent and will not give up on wanting to be king. He was passed over as king when his nephew received the crown of Jordan, but for decades he was called Crown Prince Hassan Bin Talal of Jordan. So he was the one that was supposed to receive the crown and become the next king of Jordan when his brother passed away. But he wants to be king since the crown was given to his nephew. Now he's looking for a king. He's looking for a crown, and the only one that's up for grabs is the region that was once ruled by his uncle King Faisal, that was part of the Hashemite kingdom, which is Syria and Iraq. That will then fulfill the prophecy of him being the Assyrian, another title mentioned in Scripture that the Antichrist has. He's called the Assyrian, which is present day Syria and Iraq. So it's not that he has, I have hope in my grand. No, he is relentless on trying to partner with another force that can usher in his ambition to receive a crown to become king. That's what he wants. He wants to be king. That's what it goes back to Satan's ambition, how he will sit on the mountain of the congregation. He wants to be like Jesus Christ. The mountain of congregation is the Temple Mount in Israel, which is where the Ark of the Covenant be, where the mercy seat will be, where Jesus will rule the earth. When he returns, he will rule from Jerusalem. So he wants to be like God in a sense. He wants to be a king. And this is his ambition too. So make no mistake, it's not about his children. It's not because he sees butterflies and when he sees the sunset, he's just so hopeful. No, he's relentless and ambitious and will not stop to advocate for some type of partnership because he knows he can't do it by himself. He has no military might because he's not the ruler of a nation, doesn't have the financing. So he's seeking some means to fulfill this ambition of his to become king, which is what the first seal says will happen, where a crown is given to him. That is the fulfillment of this man becoming king.
At the same time, I have to leave something I'm not being emotional, I'm just being factual, to future generations who didn't ask to be born. And if we all were going to live as nuclear winter and black skies and no sunlight for the next 50 years, then I think that is a very disgraceful way to see things. You know, people talk to me about end of days, but the judgment is in the hands of the Almighty. So
that's very interesting. The people talk to him about end of days. You're probably thinking I'm talking to him like, oh, Prince Hassan Bin Talal Jordan, I'm watching you. Don't think that you have pulled the wool over my eyes. I'm not deceived. I know who you are. Like some crazy detective in a movie that's, trying to catch the criminal, right? So I'm not emailing him, or I'm not the one telling him, but he's very versed in the Bible, the Quran. He speaks Hebrew, I believe, Arabic, French, and English, and a little bit of Spanish. Studied in Cambridge in Britain, so he is highly, highly educated, and he understands the scriptures. So don't second guess this man's understanding at all.
I mean, if at the end of days we're sitting here and that sky falls on our head, we'll have at least died with the notion, as our Peygamber has taught us, that if you die with a fruit-bearing sapling in your hand, plant it anyway. There's always hope for tomorrow.
And for some people, maybe in a refugee camp, their living reality is the end of days, isn't it?
Well, it is certainly a hardship that they are enduring, some better than others. Given the circumstances, given their talents, given their frustrated and justified ambitions to do something, they're being selected as they go to Europe algorithmically so that they can be put in as new blood into the workforce of this country and that. But at the same time, as I use the word transhumance, the fact that man is by nature nomadic is a fact today in what they used to call the North-South dialogue, the haves and the have-nots. The have-nots always seeking greener pastures, and that's what they call economic refugees. But at the same time, I think if we continue to talk about ecosphere, man and his environment, leading to ecocide, sociosphere leading to sociocide, I don't want to lecture, but I just hope that we leave a chance for cogens, which are our ability to think for ourselves and not move into a cogitocide, not basically refute what has been given to us as opposed to other creatures of God's creation, our ability to have a perspective, if we so wish.
So notice he says of God's creation. As a Muslim, they would say Allah creation. So here you see that he plays both sides. He knows his audience. He knows whether to say God to one audience or Allah to another. So I want you to just be familiar with how he's able to appease the crowd however they need to be appeased in order to be accepted by them. In this case, him speaking to a Christian or Jewish audience, saying God, as opposed to an Islamic audience saying Allah. So just want you to see that, because you'll find he'll say Allah or say God, but just see that he's playing to whatever will suit the crowd that he's speaking to.
But if we give up on our free will, our free right of expression, totally, then, robots are coming in anyway in a big way.
You said people are selected algorithmically. When you see the definitions as they are politicized as well, no, this is a migrant, this is a refugee, you qualify, you don't qualify, you can come in, you cannot come in, you can come in with rights, you can come in without rights. Should we get rid of the definitions? What should we do? How do we sort of sort this out?
I believe firmly in what has been proposed by a dear Indian friend, the head of the Strategic Foresight Group in Mumbai, who calls for a united peoples and not a united nations. Always people say the address of the United Nations should be in an expanded Security Council, because various countries feel that the Security Council membership is outdated. But
So see how he's quoting what someone in Mumbai said about we should have a united people. This speaks to the prophecy that he will play a role in with Daniel, speaking about the kingdom of iron and the kingdom of clay. The kingdom of clay, which is this region of the world, Levant in the Middle East, that he's going to want to rule. So this kingdom of clay is what is scripture, which is practically known as a united Arab region, which is the Eastern Roman Empire. So what he's quoting here or citing here about someone in Mumbai saying we should have a united people is his ambition that the Daniel prophecy speaks to about a kingdom of clay, which is the entire region of the Middle East becoming one, and he will be the ruler of that region. So he's looking at it saying, hey, let's not have little nations, little countries here. Let's all be one people. And again, this goes back to in the end times, once the mark of the beast is issued, it's going to be multiplied times 100 on a global scale, where the whole world will have to be one by proving who they worship by having a mark on their hand and their forehead. So again, just put this in the context of scripture, and things starts to make sense, that you can see he's in agreement with a united humanity or a united people. So he's in agreement with that, which again is prophesied in Daniel. So you can really wrap your mind around his ambition as foretold by the Old Testament prophets.
Does the fact that you have one organization for refugees and another for migrants and a third for nationals, UNDP, for example, the fact that there is no clustering of those SDGs that we made a lot of noise about, the fact that COVID has sent the SDGs askew. You can't talk about water without agriculture. You can't talk about agriculture without food. You can't talk about the three without energy. So when are we going to have interdisciplinary thinking? We can ask a robot to think for us in cross-cutting and interdisciplinary terms. It's about time that we recognize that all of this beauty around us has to be maintained in so many different subsystems of governance. And this is what we have to consider also for those who are genuinely excluded.
All of these things are decided by politics. So water, refugees, food, displacement. Somebody's making the decision politically. Do you feel there's a limit to what you can do and what so many other well-meaning people can do? Because ultimately, it's politicians in suits and in boardrooms or in war rooms that are making the decisions to create the food crises, the water crises, the refugees.
The concept of policies is what I try to pursue. Politics, of course, are the talking heads in parliaments and in governments and...
So again, just note how he loves wordplay. I don't deal with politics. I deal with policies. See, like, politics is the dealing with policies. So again, just catch how very manipulative he is and loves wordplay. So just want you to kind of catch on that.
In legislative assemblies, talking to each other about their share of the cake. Largely this is the case. Well, it's not a question of the vested interest that is important, or the silos that is important alone. It is also the public interest. The whole idea of credibility has to be established in moving from thinking to doing. And that means empowering and enabling people to join you in this exercise.
Well, people are just reacting to what's in front of them
A
and
knee-jerk reaction.
political cycles. So whether Democrats or autocrats, they're just trying to sort out what's in front of their noses and stay in
Yes,
power, right?
yes.
You've seen this come and go for ages, for decades.
I suppose
right?
I have, yes. I've been out of official life for over 20 years. And even when I was in official life, anything that I suggested, for example, in 1981, we proposed an economic development strategy to the Arab Summit conference that was held in Amman. I didn't get half an hour with my team to sit and address the leaders, the Arab leaders, meeting in Amman. And one of them had the audacity to say, you know, after lunch is the time for siesta. And I said, well, the Arabs have been in siesta for centuries. I mean, this one half an hour is going to make so much difference.
So again, you see how he speaks for the Arab community. So for all Arabs is what he wants to fulfill. I mean, he wants to be able to be leader over, like his great-grandfather, King Hassan Bin Ali, who ushered in the height of the Hashemite kingdom after the fall of the Ottoman Empire, where he was the self-proclaimed king and spiritual leader of Islam and of Muslims and of Arabs. So this again speaks to his ambition, his foresight in wanting to serve the entire Arab population, the entire Arab ethnicity. And this is what he wants to be able to become king of the Arabs, like his great-grandfather did, King Hussein bin Ali, after the fall of the Ottoman Empire.
They say heavy is the head that wears the crown.
Yeah.
You might not be wearing the crown, but you still carry a title. And with that comes great responsibility.
Yes, whenever people...
Look, did you see how that woke him up? He's like, well, am I getting the crown? Am I getting the crown? Oh, you say crown? You say crown? Oh, you about to give me a crown? You see how that woke him up? Now you're starting to understand, as I was speaking to before, that is what he wants. So you're like, oh no, you speaking of crown. I know you don't got no crown. Like, what did you say, crown? Did you say crown? So I want you to kind of, again, this shows and it triggers his heart, pulls a little string in there, so you can kind of get a glimpse of what his real ambition and his drive is.
People say, Your Royal Highness, I look behind me. I can't believe this.
This is the only royal here on the veranda, that's for sure. It comes with great responsibility. Do you find that sometimes with that responsibility, you cannot say what you truly think, or you cannot go to the extent that you want to go because of the weight of power?
Yes, because you don't want to shake the boat. You're part of an establishment. You don't want to step out of your comfort zone or the establishment's comfort zone. But at the same time, you have to be true to yourself if you're going to have any persona. I mean, starting with your own immediate family. I mean, if you have an opinion, you can express it in a more or less friendly manner and not raise the opprobrium so that people start talking about generation gap and so forth. The same thing happens after in 20 years, a new generation has appeared. And I asked them as young parliamentarians, for example, why don't we have a conversation? I receive parliamentarians or visitors from all over the world. A conversation would be useful to all. Well, we don't want to disturb you, uncle, they say, you know, and that's rather patronizing from them. So,
Your own personal situation could have been very Shakespearean, but you chose a better way.
Well,
You might have been king, you went on a different path that was taken away from you, and you decided to...
Oh, he really striking a nerve now. So let's see what he says. He says, you could have been king, but you went another path. So he's really twisting it in there, speaking on a very sensitive subject. So let's see what he says about being king. Because again, per Revelation's first seal, where the prophecy is a crown is given to him, it's speaking about Prince Hassan Bin Talal of Jordan, because it's a role of a monarch to receive a crown. So in other words, the first seal is talking about a coronation. So when it says a crown is given to him, it's about the coronation of a prince who becomes king. So the Antichrist comes from a monarch nation, and per Daniel, we understand that the end times of the iron clay derives from the East-West Roman Empire, which was once the iron legs. So as it goes to the feet, which is iron and clay, it derives from the East-West Roman Empire. So it must mean he's an Arab, and who comes from a monarch nation. And Turkey's not a monarch, Lebanon is not a monarch, Syria is not a monarch, Iraq is not a monarch, and Gaza is not a monarch. Jordan is a monarch. That's an Arab in the eastern side of the Roman Empire. And this points to him, Prince Hassan Bin Talal, when he receives a crown to become king. But again, like I said before, he was passed over. So let's see what else he has to say.
Pursue your career in a specific way. Tell me more about that and why you chose this path.
Well, I was invited as a young man to be a stopgap, in the sense that in the early 60s, the United States, King Abdullah is my nephew, and had just been born, and so there had to be a continuity, a continuum. And in Oxford, where I was studying in the early 60s, I was obliged to study our region, as it were, and hopefully I studied Hebrew, among other things, and people came up to me and said, why Hebrew? And I said, well, presumably it's going to be a language that we need, especially with the Sephardic community in Israel, because many of these people come from Iraq or from Andalusia or North Africa and so forth, so they used to say, talk to your enemy.
So you heard from his own lips how he went to learn Hebrew. So as he went to learn Hebrew, the language of the Jewish people, and that he's going to be a king, and that the Jordanians are the only ones who can allow the third temple to be built, it points again to him and how he's the arbiter of peace in the Middle East. It points to how the Jews will totally welcome him, as well as the Arabs and Muslims as well. So we see that it points to him again, how he went to learn Hebrew specifically to build relations with Israel, and which goes back to the prophecy of he shall affirm a covenant with many, or with Israel, for 1 week. And we see that he not only wrote and signed a peace treaty with Israel in 1994, the Jordanian Israeli peace treaty. So again, you see, and you're hearing from his own lips, everything points to this guy here.
Know your enemy. And it's rather strange that we used to have a Hebrew-speaking service before we even got to the concept of a peace treaty. So I'm busying myself with thoughts, and the first thing I had to do when I came back...
You heard it yourself. What I just spoke about, how there's a peace treaty with Israel in Jordan, and how Israel is their enemy, but he's speaking the language of them, in which he will then affirm a covenant with them per Daniel's prophecy during the 927, and grant them the permission to build the third temple, because all the temple restoration and building had to been done with the king. We see that King Solomon built it. King Nebuchadnezzar destroyed it. King Cyrus commissioned the rebuilding of it. King Antiochus Epiphanes desecrated it. King Titus of Rome destroyed it. And we're going to see another king do it again.
In 1967 was to go down and visit a refugee site where we were building a huge camp on a water aquifer. And I said to the Minister of Interior of the time, we're building on a water aquifer. He said, don't worry, this is temporary. So everything to me became temporary. I served in public office for over 35 years. And when it was over, that phase of my life, I felt that I had served my king, my country, and the national good or the regional good, and that I should move on and find greener pastures, as it were. And my late brother in his...
And so, what does that mean? Greener pastures. It means speaking the rest of the time, advocating for interfaith dialogue, trying to advocate for a regional confederacy or regional state, as there are Europeans, which within many regions are Europeans. The same thing he wants to, as there are many nations and regions in the Middle East, he wants to make them one region. So that is what he's been pushing since then.
Wisdom had taken this decision, and he wanted to go back to his eldest son, and here we are. I'm privileged to be able to serve my country and my king in that way.
While you served within the system, while you serve as you do now, while you were crown prince, while you do the work that you do now as Prince Al Hassan, you've seen kings and queens come and go, Islamists and Arab nationalists, secularists, religious, left, right, dictators, democrats, populists. Nothing seems to have worked in the region. Is that fair? I mean, what's been missing over all of these decades, all these generations in the region?
I think what's been missing in our Levant region in particular is that we have not considered that
the Levant region is the Middle East, stretching from Turkey all the way to Israel to Egypt and North Africa. That's the Levant.
The fact that we are, as Arabs, 71 million people. Our GDP is not much more than a few $1,000s. If you take the Visegrad countries, Poland, Czechia, Slovakia, and Hungary, they are amazingly over 40,000 per capita, more like Israel or the Gulf states. They have a hugely dynamic economy, particularly at the end, since the end of the Cold War, and with the investment of the Western countries in industry, which they demanded. We have not yet been looked at as a hinterland to oil. Everybody says oil and strategic waterways, but the fact that much of the technical manpower comes not only from our hinterland, but also from South Asia, was a point that I made in the International Labour Organization in the 1970s. I called for an international compensatory facility. So no arbitrary laying off of workers, choosing people according, rather like that algorithm we spoke about, but between Asian countries. And if we had been able to do that then, we would have been able to aggregate both for the country that is receiving and for the nationals of our own country. This unfortunately was not possible because everyone wants to be important. Everyone's flag and everyone's national anthem is important. And the concept of region was brought about in Europe because of coal and steel. I was saying bring it about because of water and energy. Let's have a water and energy community for the Near East. And this is a thematic approach. It's not a personal approach where this...
Just want you to bring to mind how he wants to advocate for sharing water, bring water. Let's have a conversation about water, spreading water to a lot of the refugees and people in the Arab world where water is necessary. And notice how Jesus was also the giver of water, but living water. And yet here we see he wants to be the servant of distributing water throughout the Arab world.
This country sounds better than that country.
Is it actually possible to have any regional cooperation on security, on development, or anything like that at a time when the region is divided into camps? You decide to go with the Iranian camp or the Saudi camp or the American camp, the Russian camp. There are different wars and conflicts ongoing. You have the situation with the Israeli occupation. All of these things, I could list 100 things.
Yeah.
Ultimately, people are drowning in the details of that. How can you actually sit everybody down and say, hey, we need to build institutions together and come together?
You basically say you have a choice of either a polarity of hatred. There are many studies on the polarity of hatred, cultivation of hatred. And I don't particularly care. As I said, you can disagree on 6 or 7 points. Whether you like me or don't like me is not really material to the end of our conversation. But if we live to talk another day, then there's a chance. If we talk about low-hanging fruit, water, for example, is that so impossible to bear in mind that it's not us that matter, it's the millions of people out there who matter. They are.
So here you're hearing him trying to advocate for the millions of people that are out there. Well, let's make it clear that Scripture shows us he only cares about himself, his own ambition. And then when he enters into the temple, the third temple, Satan will possess his body. He will take that to another level. Just as Scripture says, where Satan is very self-centered. I will ascend above the Most High. I will be like God. I will build a mountain congregation. I will, So he's definitely is not thinking about, per the Scriptures, he's not thinking about millions of people. But the flattery of it makes it seem like he is, like he's so he is just he just wants to make sure millions of people are taken care of, when truly he has his own agenda and his own ambition.
Going to be deprived of that.
But the
water.
populist says my people need this water and not those other guys to help
Yes,
with
well,
them.
who asked my people whether they're aware? I mean, people they won't turn, people of the East will not turn their back, or the West, or turn their backs on each other. It's the politicians who make us turn our backs on each other, and that is what is so worrying. So if, as I said, in the Danube Commission, you have a concept that has superseded and transcended even the height of the Cold War, because everyone needs to drink water, then we should, in theory, be able to develop a plurality.
So see again how Jesus is the giver of living water, as he said in Scriptures and in the Gospel. And again, you hear Prince Hassan Bin Talal Jordan here, how he wants to just make sure water is given out to the whole world. He wants to give water to those who need it, everyone. Again, this is the counterfeit version of the Christ who gave spiritual water, and the Antichrist who's giving physical water. So hopefully you're starting to see the pattern here.
Based on respect for the other. The right to protect has been talked about a lot, and we've failed miserably in that. But what about the right to respect? Develop a healthy respect for the themes. I mean, it's all very well to say the SDGs have to be implemented by the next following years. But if you don't respect the other, as you rightly pointed out, hey, my people, it's the me that is important.
And for them, human dignity means that. I'm taking care of my people.
Well, I'm trying always to say, let's move from me to we.
This is this is such a joke. Again, he's trying to use words of flattery, of suggesting to his audience that he's considering the interest of we, the people. I'm thinking about millions of people. It's not about me, it's about we, it's about us, where Scripture tells us it's definitely all about him. So I just want you to kind of get past the smoke here and get through the weeds and look past that to really understand that he's talking about himself. He's very self-interest in himself, in his own ambition, and in what he wants to achieve per the Scriptures, as he goes conquering and to conquer. So this is just a flattering way of projecting that he's an advocate for humanity. But make sure you understand that's not the case.
Let us work together as in a collective and inclusive way.
You talk of dialogue. How do you finesse the dialogue with those in power who maybe are the arsonist and the fireman at the same time? They're bombing a place and they're also giving food.
Yes.
They're also giving aid.
Yes.
How do you engage with them?
With great difficulty. I mean, I was made aware of the fact that the evangelicals in the United States, for example, have a very deep fear of Arabs and Muslims because they consider that we are all very violent. But of course, I don't want to get into who has the...
So now he's starting to speak to to Americans, in a sense that he thinks American Christians have this perspective that all Arabs are violent, they're all terrorists. So he's now shifting towards the Christian audience, or the American audience. So I want you to understand that he's very much aware of America's stance in the world. So let's see what else he says.
The biggest club in this world, and where the arsenal...
Okay, so now he sees that America has the biggest club in the world, like stick, because of the weapons. So from his perspective, Americans, who's the nation that has the biggest stick via the weapons are also full of Christians who thinks his people, Arabs in the Middle East, are terrorists. So let's see what he says about that.
Of weapons are most effective. We all know what we're talking about up to a point. But what is worrying for me is that if that is the case, then what about Arabs who are Christian, for example? What about Eastern Christianity? Does it not have an effect on people's minds when they celebrate Christmas in a few weeks or months' time? Do they not think of the birthplace of Christianity?
So here he's very, very clever. He's now trying to wedge between American Christians and Middle Eastern or Arab Christians and trying to say that, hey, I'm your rightful representative. I'm the person that have your interests, Arab Christians, Middle East Christians, not America. America thinks that you're a terrorist. America thinks that you're the problem. So being that America doesn't think that you're like them, I do. I understand how you have a belief in Christianity. Now, notice how again he has an understanding of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. So make no mistake that he knows about the most popular religions, the most three popular religions in the Middle East. But now he's putting a wedge between it to try to rally Arab Christians around him, trying to rally Middle Eastern Christians around him, saying that there's a divide between American Christians and Arab or Middle Eastern Christians, and that he has their true interest at heart, not America. Because from what he's suggesting, America just thinks that you're an Arab and therefore you must be a terrorist. That's what he's suggesting here.
So, I mean, is this second wave of fundamentalism going to be a reaction to the waves of fundamentalism that have existed before? After all, the Alexandria library was destroyed by the iconoclasts. The Arabs participated in translating the classics. But who is today wanting to destroy classical civilization other than those who think that firmly that the second coming is preview, and therefore that's the way it is, and to take it or leave it.
As you said, we all have to shuffle off this mortal coil at some point in time. We're leaving behind a world for our children, our grandchildren. Yeah. What worries you the most when you look at the world that we're leaving behind?
I think greed, basically. I mean, as we say, I don't know how you say it in Turkish, but the most hideous of insults to humanity is greed, jealousy. You have what I want to have, and therefore I want to take it from.
He's really projecting here, because once the first seal opens, the prophecy is that a crown will be given to him, and so he'll become king, and then he's going to conquering and to conquer. So he's essentially greedy, and he won't stop beyond what he wants to conquer and want more and more, especially once Satan enters his body. So he's really projecting here, and then seeing, oh, you have what I want. Well, that really speaks to Syria and Iraq, when he goes to take Syria and Iraq and becomes the Assyrian. So this is in a sense, this is him projecting, because he will carry out greed. He would carry out an ambition to take other nations and go conquering and to conquer.
From you by any way, not fair or foul, but any way that is possible. And I think that this concept of going down to grassroots and what we call civil society playing a serious role in acting as a moral pressure on decision making in developing policies that we can share, that is probably the most important issue. But today we hear about security. So it's always against something, against terror, against whatever, narcotics, against, all very well. I mean, I accept all of that has to be done. And I think that lawmakers have a very difficult task. But on the other hand, what about working for something? What about working for a culture of peace, a culture of reconciliation, a culture of developing a shared memory? Where are our archives? I mean, the president of the Hebrew University visited me some few years ago.
So just I want you to see again his relationship with Israel, his relationship in Turkey, his relationships in the States, his relationship in Indonesia, his relationship with European royals. His relationship is vast and wider than what you might think. So you have to give that consideration in understanding his influence in the political relationships that he has, and don't play it down just because you've never heard of him before. You can see that he clearly has an influence in relationship with world leaders today.
And he said, I want to thank you for what you did for us in the 11th century. I said, well, the 11th century is a bit before my time. And if you're talking about the translation of classics, I mean, the Arabs and many others participated in that. But I want to ask you in return, and we've signed the peace treaty and all the rest of it.
So notice how again he's talking about the peace treaty he signed is the one that he wrote and signed in 1994, which was the Jordanian-Israeli peace treaty. So this happened in 94 with Bill Clinton, who brokered it. So this again puts him in a position so that when he becomes king in the first seal, he can then fulfill the prophecy in Daniel 9:27 and affirm the covenant for a week with many, or affirm a covenant with Israel based off of what was already there. To affirm means to strengthen. So it has to already be there in order to strengthen it. And so he's now, you can hear how he speaks to the treaty that he signed.
What intellectual generosity are you showing in terms of making available the fund and the networking of knowledge that you have at your disposal for the development of the region?
So the region that he's talking about is the prophecy mentioned in Daniel about the kingdom of clay, which is the Eastern Roman Empire, which is what he's talking about in terms of region. So when he's talking about region, he specifically is mentioning, or his sights is set on controlling the Levant, which is the Middle East that stretches from Turkey all the way down to Egypt and North Africa, or what he likes to call West Asia, North Africa. So whenever you hear the term West Asia, North Africa, it's just a coined phrase of his that's a better brand than saying Middle East. Middle East has too many, it's a bad brand when you say Middle East, but for him, it's West Asia, North Africa, which is the biblical term known as the kingdom of clay, seen in Daniel. So that's what he's talking about when he's mentioning a region. That's where his eyes and his sights are set on.
We've greened our country, we have the sole democracy in the region and so forth. But when will we agree that in these international associations that we meet, and the international, I know there are difficulties, there are enormous difficulties, and there are prejudices on all sides, but isn't it time that we committed ourselves at least to that low-lying fruit?
Is there a lack of leadership in the region, or is there a lack of opportunity for the people who should be leaders to become the leaders?
I think a bit of both. Maybe one is because of the other, but I certainly think that all of these wonderful meetings that we attend cost a lot of money. And I've always felt, and I think this feeling is shared by many others, that if that money were dedicated to actually doing something. You know, I love the expression, think to do tanks. I mean, someone gets an inspiration.
When he's talking about, okay, so yeah, have you ever heard of the non-government organizations or NGOs called think tanks? He's brilliant when it comes to wordplay. So he doesn't call it think tanks. He calls things to do tanks instead of think tanks. They're things to do tanks. And when he's talking about money, he wants to be the arbiter of the money that goes out in the region. So he wants to be the individual that holds all the wealth that's given to the region, but it's really for his own self-ambition that he wants to do.
And goes to do something about the return of cholera in Syria, for example, or in Lebanon. That's why I admire Médecins Sans Frontières, for example. That's why I admire Dr. Knott's work with the, I can't remember what color helmets they were in Syria.
The white helmets.
White helmets, exactly. And I met him and his wife, and they did fantastic work. But when you look at forgotten spaces, such as Somalia, and you see that those camels dying, and we don't have to, I mean, you know, skeletons of animals. This is the 5th year of drought. What happened in the 1st and 2nd and 3rd year?
Well, you remind me, I saw a statistic that came out by ActionAid, Action Against Hunger,
Yes,
who said that 7% of money committed
Yes.
to fight hunger
yes,
in the past year was funded. Only
Yes,
7%.
only 7%.
93% unfunded.
Yes.
So, okay, nice fancy conferences, good speeches,
Yes.
pledging money, keeping your money in your
Well,
pocket.
exactly. We received 1.5 million refugees from the Iraq War Theater, Iraq-Kuwait War Theater. In a couple of weeks, the desert was full of people. And I was asking all organizations to use our air bases, and NATO, I believe, has a civilian wing. Why don't you bring these people the necessary food aid directly into their air bases? We had blotted our copybook as it appeared because some people understood that we were too close to Iraq. But obviously we're close to Iraq. We neighbor Iraq on the one side, we neighbor Israel on the other. What choice do we have? We don't get ourselves over-involved, but at the same time we are neighboring a country that has been sanctioned. And as with Romania, for example, in the Balkan crisis, they were not sanctioned for being neighbors. But this sanction also meant that we didn't receive civilian assistance. And this is terribly unfair, this system of wrapping you over the knuckles, you've done wrong. Wrong by whose playbook?
Your Royal Highness, Prince Hassan Bin Talal of Jordan. It's been a pleasure. I wish you good health,
I
long
really
life.
enjoyed talking
Thank
to
you very much.
Thank
It was a
you
great
very much.
conversation.
Thank you. And I hope we do it again.
Yes, I'd
sometime.
love to come to Amman.
You're
I
most
spent some
welcome.
time there in 2008, and
Well,
I love it.
My home is your home, anytime.
Much appreciated. Thank you, sir.
All right, so there we can see how Prince Hassan Bin Talal of Jordan, how he's portrayed as the one, based off this interview and correlating what his comments to scripture. We see more and more evidence pointing to him as the one who will be the Antichrist. Again, that's not who he is now, but that's who will become the Antichrist. And it's based off of the scriptures that we see that the Antichrist will do. He advocates for, seeing that Jesus Christ was the giver of the spiritual living water. He wants to be the giver of physical water. We see how Jesus is called the Prince of Peace, and yet he also, Prince Hassan, wants to facilitate peace in the Middle East. We see how Daniel talks about how there's going to be a kingdom of clay in the region once known as the Eastern Roman Empire, present day Middle East, and see that he has just a soft spot for bringing a whole region together, which is what he calls West Asia, North Africa, and it goes on and on again. We see how he has a clear understanding about the American politics and Christians in America, and he's trying to wedge between Christians in America and Christians everywhere else, specifically the Middle East, and how he should be a representative for Arab Christians or Middle East Christians. So again, we see how this is definitely all paths seems to point to this man as the one who will be the future Antichrist. So I hope you enjoyed this commentary on this interview. Leave me a comment below if you want more. You can see the website here, therevelationwatchman.com, and definitely visit the website. I'll post this up there for you to rewatch again, and don't hesitate to reach out and ask the questions you have. It's a pleasure to serve you. It's a pleasure to serve you. Thank you so much for watching.